joining us. My name is Maggie Danielson. I'm going to be the student host for this event. I'm coming from UCI, so I just want to say thank you to everyone, especially from outside the UCI that is joining us today. Um, Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that this session is going to be recorded for YouTube and for our GPSM YouTube channel. And then also please keep your mics muted for the Q&A portion when Adriana is done speaking. Please either use the hand raise feature or post your question into the chat, and then we can get to, or I'll go through the chat and make sure that somebody's seen it so that we can get your questions answered. So with that, I'm going to jump right in. So I'm really excited to introduce our speaker, Dr. Adriana Bankston. So Dr. Bankston is a federal government relations expert, and she's passionate about scientific research and innovation. You may know her from her work advocating for the University of California's research priorities in Washington, D.C., as well as bolstering science policy for Congress. Dr. Bankston holds a PhD in biochemistry, cell, and developmental biology from Emory, so she truly understands the benchtop to policy pipeline. She's a nationally recognized leader in the STEM workforce, having received awards such as the Excellence in Advocacy from the Advocacy Association, the inaugural ERIS Emerging Broader Impacts Leader Award, and the Sigma Xi, I think is how you say it, Next Generation Women's Leadership Award. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Adriana Bankston.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So let's see, try this. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the invitation to talk to you about the research enterprise today. I'll try not to make everyone too depressed, but also I want to answer some of your questions that you asked previously that might help to make this a bit more constructive too. So we will cover the state of the enterprise and also what has been done or could be done. And also I'll tell you a little bit about my career path, which may be useful for providing some examples for engagement too. And we'll also talk about Congress. So I thought it might be useful to tell you about what it was like working in Congress during the Trump administration. That might also help provide some opportunities for engagement and also discuss how to communicate with Congress and messaging, which has come up. And again, you all have asked about messaging and how to talk to Congress. So we'll try to cover some of that that came up in the questions. Okay, so state of the enterprise, I want to start with Vannevar Bush. So he was an American engineer. And he advocated for federal support for scientific research. He was also the first presidential science advisor. His text from 1945, Science, the Endless Frontier, was the basis for a lot of where the research enterprise started and also led to the formation of the National Science Foundation, among other things. In this quote, in the right here, he explained why scientific research and progress is important for our country. And in 2024, Marcia McNutt, who recently stepped down as president for the National Academy of Sciences, she explained how many benefits that have come up from Vannevar Bush's text. And so you're welcome to watch that talk from 2024. I wouldn't go into that, but it really set up, this country for success in research. Now, in her talk in 2024, in the top right, and also other reports, obviously there have been many other reports ever since on the state of the enterprise. And we're really now at a risk of losing our global leadership in science. Not surprising. In this top right graph, you can see China at the time, which is the second line in the red, was catching up to the US, which is the top blue line. And this has really happened. So bottom right here is an article from AAU in 2026 with data from OECD showing that China surpassed the US. As you can see at the very last point there, the red line is higher than the blue. So in this case, it really is true that China has come farther than we have. And a lot of that is due to investing more in research and development. So China is investing a lot in their R&D. And in addition to that, the other issue, we're really not producing enough human talent to do all this research that we need to do and sustain the research. And as we know, it's been a very tumultuous time in American science in the last year or so, including an unprecedented brain drain in STEM in terms of losing the talent to other nations. Again, AAU, Association of American Universities, has documented a lot of this, as well as other groups. But they've highlighted also how the pipeline has come under strain. So we're really obviously in a state of losing our leadership, and then also, really concerning as far as the brain drain and loss of STEM talent to other nations. So there's multiple ways to look at this, and I'm going to talk through some of the players here. So from the standpoint of academic researchers and universities, this led to a reduced number of PhD admissions, as you can see in this Nature post in 2025. There's also been a lack of diverse talent, mainly due to funding cuts, obviously, in research grants, but also there's been removal of diversity-related awards from grants, as I'm sure you've seen. And so, of course, this is really leading a lot of folks to not feel really welcome in STEM and in science from this administration. At the same time, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but academic scientists play an important role in safeguarding the future of the enterprise, and you can get involved in various ways that we'll talk about. And as we've seen, academics from different career stages have spoken out against the funding cuts. And perhaps one silver lining has been an increased interest and engagement with Congress and advocacy from academics who are interested in sharing their stories and asking Congress for help too. So with that in mind, there's been an increased interest from academics to advocate for science in Congress and to describe the impacts that this administration has had on their research and careers. There's been a lot of articles, so I just picked a few here from Nature, stating that scientists are fighting back and speaking out. And this is really just hoping to serve as a motivation for you to get involved. Also, I'm on a more personal note, I'm also writing a book about the research enterprise and how scientists can get involved in advocacy. So whenever that's out, hopefully it'll be a good resource for you all. Okay, so now just as an example, I wanted to show you sort of in this vein of getting involved and continuing to document what's happening. Some of the research I've been working on over the past year that was published this month in Frontiers documented the impacts of the administration on early career researchers and their careers. This work was performed through the STEM Advocacy Institute, which is a Massachusetts-based nonprofit, also called SAI Resident Collective, operates as a collective. It is run by the Civic Science Media Lab. But basically, the organization creates pathways between science and society, and we have a policy research group where early career researchers were interested in really documenting this impact. And so most of them are trainees. They really spearheaded this. And, it's now out. But we started about a year ago or so, did a brief survey about how the administration impacted early career researchers when it was really acute last May and June or so. Folks were trying to figure out what to do. There are a lot of different figures, but just wanted to show you a couple here that, we highlighted impacts on early career researchers were quite severe, which is the red bar. And many trainees wanted to leave research as a career, which is the red piece of the pie here on the right. We also asked them how universities can have addressed these issues, and respondents discussed what Congress can do to help. So I encourage you to check that out if you're interested. But we thought it was important to document this from the standpoint of trainees in sort of a, again, short survey to highlight their thoughts on the state of science. Okay. So keeping with that, because again, I will encourage you to continue getting involved and not to give up on science because of what's happening. But trainees have undertaken a lot of actions around the country. So I wanted to highlight some of their work, some of which you've probably seen or heard of. But they organized Stand Up for Science, which I'm sure you've seen. Then they founded the nonprofit Science for Good out of that. They also launched civic engagement campaigns, formed other networks like SNAP, Scientist Network for Advancing Policy, and also launched the McClintock Letters Project with local op-eds and also congressional visits. They led advocacy workshops through a Speaking Out for Science, or SOS, group. And other things. So we documented some of this in a Medium blog post in 2025. You're welcome to read that. Someone asked questions about how I maintain hope during this time. This is really how it is. Young people doing all of these things, gives me hope that there's, still a bright future because they're trying to fight back. And all of these things have come from, a small group of trainees that have spearheaded a lot of this. So you can get involved too. Okay, so that's sort of the pitch to stay involved as a trainee. Now I want to transition to what have other stakeholders done that you might be involved with. Obviously, I'm assuming a lot of y'all are in universities, part of scientific societies. So these are all really important players in the field, but I also want to show a bit of what's been done to fight back. Universities and societies both are important players that have academic members and folks studying there. So one thing is that associations like AAU, APLU, and ACE sued President Trump for cutting NIH research funding. The UC system has also supported this. And in addition, higher education groups challenged the anti-DEI executive order on the right side here. So again, a few examples. I know there's been a lot of activity trying to document some of this, again, to show that all these different stakeholders are trying to do something and fighting back in different ways. The arguments have been made, obviously, around cutting research funding and also the administration's dismantling of DEI efforts. So in that sense, it's helpful to engage with your institution, including government relations offices who have relationships with Congress and can sort of work on some of this and fight back. We'll talk a bit later about that, what their roles are, but also scientific societies have engaged their members with Congress as well. So that's another good resource to engage in advocacy. And sort of where we are right now. So this is a newsletter from AIP, FYI, just in late July. So as we think back to Vannevar Bush, I'm highlighting everything here. It's a good newsletter to read, but they spoke about the White House OSTP report that just came out called Science Golden Age, which puts individual researchers ahead of institutions and also would update Vannevar Bush's text to fund research differently in ways that involve more high risk, high reward, and supporting also other institutions that are not academic research universities, but startups, independent research organizations, nonprofits, industry. And this obviously can have broad consequences if we're going to fund research differently and support other types of organizations that are not universities, what that's going to do to the system. So I guess we'll wait and see on that, but things are changing, or at least trying to. One potential positive is White House and the Department of Energy partnered to release the first research awards and also create a consortium to enable this through a Genesis mission, which would support 142 universities, 60 national labs, 157 companies, and 60 nonprofits. And the largest project has been for about 60 million related to AI nuclear energy, which could be interesting. So would encourage you to subscribe to this newsletter to kind of keep up with what's happening nationally. It's free and very timely and interesting stuff. So something to look at. And again, this was just a few days ago. And then sort of to close this loop, one question that has come up is, what is Congress doing in all this? Where is Congress and all these things we've seen? So in a little bit, I'll tell you about what we've done while I was working in the House during this administration. But as you might imagine, there's been a lot of reports on what's been happening in Congress during this time. One thing I can say is many representatives have spoken out against the Trump administration's actions on science, including my former boss. One example is that there was this special order hour organized by Representative Haley Stevens. On the left side here, a lot of members of Congress participated and spoke out. During this event, as also others, House members have spoken out against, again, the cuts to try to defend critical research projects and the workforce and where we're going as a country. And then two articles on the right side on the Senate. Again, it's been a lot more, but senators from both parties criticized Trump's moves on science and also sent a bill rejecting science funding to the president's desk, again, from AAU. So this is to say that Congress has been fighting back, and I've seen a lot of this firsthand also when I worked there. Okay, so one break. Okay, so this is sort of the state of science portion. Now I'm going to transition to telling you a little bit about my career path, where can you engage, but also to give you some background and opportunities where you can be doing policy. Sorry. Okay. So I've worked with universities, and this all connects to what I've already said, but I've worked with universities, scientific societies, nonprofits in Congress. These are all players within the science policy ecosystem or web that you can see on the right. You can also do policy in other settings like think tanks, which are more research-based, also biotech companies who also lobby Congress on science, or state governments or agencies that give you different ways to impact the enterprise. But these players all interact, and so it's important when you're, lobbying Congress for something that you understand sort of where this all sits in the grand scheme of things. So all these players interact. You can see in the middle part, you have Congress, federal agencies, executive offices, and scientific interest groups with the red lines. Outer players like universities, scientific societies, industry, national labs, and state and local governments all interact with it. The media sort of back and forth. And then you have the public on the outside. So I'm showing this. This is from Beyond Sputnik, which is a classic book published in 2008. But in the context of, we're trying to influence Congress, they're getting a lot of input from all these other groups on a daily basis, right? So, at the same time, they rely on constituents and all these other groups to get information when they're writing a bill, working on a letter, a speech, or anything like that. These groups can be a resource. So if you're a university, that plugs into where, they look for input from academics and experts from what they're working on. So this is just to say that Congress gets a lot of information, but also they rely on these other groups to get information for what they're doing. So we'll talk a little bit later about communication techniques, how do you talk to Congress, but I wanted to put this into context of where Congress is in this web, and sort of how these players interact, how you can get involved to kind of get you thinking about different places you could work and get involved in. So I'm going to just quickly walk you through my career path, and really just because I want to highlight some places where, again, you can get involved, thinking about the web sort of during this time. Um, so I got my start in academia. I have a PhD in biochemistry from Emory. I'm from Laney Graduate School. Worked on muscular dystrophy, but importantly, we started a career seminar series to bring in speakers to talk to postdocs about careers. We also had a couple of policy talks from people who ended up at scientific organizations and in Congress. So this is a plug for you that you could develop trainings like this that can help you build events as a skill set. That is always discussions and policy. So being able to organize this sort of training can be helpful for your own career too. But again, these trainings are helpful if there's something like this available at your institution. And then after leaving the lab, I worked with a nonprofit called Future of Research. We published research and work to incentivize institutions to increase postdoc salaries in response to federal labor law. So this is really the first time that I saw how federal bill impacted postdocs in the academic world. So that got me interested in federal policy in DC as a way to impact the enterprise itself. We also published papers on why we should include trainees in leadership roles within scientific societies. So my interest in really empowering trainees goes a long way, and hopefully I can continue doing this in this talk today. But this is also another plug for you that nonprofits are a good way to get started, especially if you're interested in research, to try to push for change. There's a lot of nonprofits that are likely working on a policy topic you might be interested in. So this one just happens to be really around research. But it's a good way to start. Nonprofits are always looking for people to help out on projects. So something to think about. And then as a scientist, it was then nice to work with Society for Neuroscience. So I've sort of been putting a plug, I guess, for scientific societies. Really, any of them, it's nice to see how they advocate for research with Congress. This is a large society, a lot going on, but great experience to try to see how this is done with Congress. They do a good job involving their academic members and trainees and students in Hill Days. Some of the things we've done here, we summarize federal updates for SFN membership through a monthly advocacy network newsletter, wrote testimony for the president of the Society on NIH and NSF funding, also responded to an RFI, which is request for information from the NIH. And then we organized the Hill Day where we had over 80 meetings with congressional staff and leadership and students. So this can be a great way to get started in the field. Scientific societies are really active in DC and constantly working with Congress. And then one other plug here, once I finished the fellowship with them, I stayed engaged with the local chapter. So that's the bottom thing here, the DC chapter. Also a good way to stay involved. We organized events around research and workforce. Another option to get started in policy or keep staying involved with the chapter of a society that you may be a part of. And then I sort of went back to my roots, as was mentioned in the introduction, worked for University of California System Office, Federal Government Relations, where we advocated for the university's research priorities with Congress, the administration, and federal agencies. So effectively, this means doing congressional meetings and briefings. For example, one event we did, we did one event on the impacts of COVID-19 on early career researchers and the enterprise. And then analyzed bills on research and science, made recommendations, also wrote an amendment for the CHIPS and Science Act in the right here, which is really nice. We wanted to include postdoctoral researchers in the bill, which nicely came full circle to my prior work on postdoc salaries a few years ago. We also contributed to an NSF RFI, again, request for information. NSF was looking for input on their strategic plan, which AAU submitted, and we wrote some language for that. And then also organized a briefing on AI, AI research and other things. So briefings are a good way to get involved, as well as RFIs, legislative language, in addition to doing congressional meetings with offices and committees, like I encourage you to do. So again, some more ideas of things you can do. Government relations offices, really, that's their job, is to be the liaison to the federal government. So get to know your staff, government relations staff at your school if you don't know them, because they can help you engage. Okay, so now I'm going to pivot to talking about Congress, because this is another opportunity to make a difference if you spend some time on the Hill. And obviously, Congress is an influential branch of government, regulates research funding, can also override some of the things from the executive branch and try to stop some things from happening. So during basically when Trump took office, I started working for Bill Foster, who is the only PhD physicist in Congress. My portfolio was heavily focused on research and science, also had some technology-related projects, including AI, STEM education, and STEM immigration, among other topics. And so we introduced and also co-sponsored legislation in this area, most notably Keep STEM Talent Act, which supports foreign-born talent, National Pi Day, American Innovation Act, and also resolution celebrating the 75th anniversary of NSF. These are just a few things. There's many other bills, but just a few representative things we've done. And then also we co-sponsored bills on AI, which I didn't show here, including, in addition to Researcher Act, top right. Again, this includes postdoc compensation and science funding bills like FAIR Act, which supports NIH funding. Importantly, we sent a letter to the Trump administration expressing our disapproval that they fired staff from NSF, and I got to write that letter and circulate it as well, so that was pretty nice. Gives you a bit of sense of, again, fighting back from Congress if you're in an office like this, and things you can be doing to communicate. And so this can be helpful. Again, this is sort of a plug for you to get to know your member of Congress and their staff, because these are some things you can do. If you build relationships with them, you can help with legislation on letters, things like that. The other thing, very important, is to really know what committees your members are on. So he was on the House Science Committee. We staffed him for hearings related to national labs and biotech. Again, these are just a few of the many things we did. He also submitted testimony, which I helped write, on national labs, infrastructure, AI policy, foreign-born scientists, and the federal scientific workforce. Again, there's sort of a general theme here, but it's interesting to see also when members testify to a committee and answer questions. So if you are trying to influence your member, it's important to know which committee they're on. Obviously, if he's on science committee, he probably cares about that, and many other folks do. So try to target those people. But because that can try to help push your ideas further. And again, as I mentioned, that talking to congressional staff can help input some of your ideas into the bills and letters they're working on. Committee staff are very, very influential in terms of moving bills. And they often obviously support the members on the committee, but they also have bills that they want to introduce, and introducing it through the committees faster. Long story. But the point here is to know which committees your members are on, because that'll influence what you can do, and get to know their staff and get to know the committee staff. For example, House Science Committee has jurisdiction over National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, but not NIH. So if you're trying to help science, again, figure out which committees are are dealing with which agencies. And again, a lot of the government relations staffers at your institution and probably your scientific society have connections with congressional staff already, so get to know them. Other things we have done, which again, I sort of alluded to this before, have been congressional briefings with the Research and Development Caucus. That's another way to engage and organize events around specific topics. So again, a couple of examples here. One was around the brain drain that I mentioned at the start with the Federation of American Scientists. Another one was strengthening the research enterprise with the National Academies Group. And also we organized several meetings with trainees and students to learn about their experiences during this administration, MIT group, and then also Vanderbilt group, students and trainees who are advocating for specific bills and, came to the office to discuss. And then we try to include some of their asks into what the member was doing. So again, encourage you to create relationships with your members and their staff, especially for students. This sort of thing is not unusual for staffers to meet with student groups on the issues that they have. And then sort of going back to the question, what is Congress doing that is maybe more visible to support science? So one thing is, as you might imagine, there's been a lot of discussions about the state of science since Trump took office. So one thing is, Representative Foster, because he's one of the few scientists on the Hill, was interviewed by a lot of different outlets to talk about the state of science. So we got to write his speeches and remarks, which is interesting. Again, a few examples. One is Science Business. He gave speeches for various organizations like CNSF, Coalition for National Science Funding, so they advocate for NSF funding. He also spoke at Stand Up for Science in DC, so that's pretty fun. You can watch it online. And other events on the future of the science, just a few. One was organized by Science and Technology Action Committee and National Science Foundation, National Science Board. A lot of different members speaking there. And then really focused on maintaining robust science funding. And he also spoke at the Roadmap Summit, which deals with how federal investments in the CHIPS and Science Act facilitated regional innovation across the nation. So nice to see that. And on the Hill, again, I sort of mentioned the Haley Stevens event, but there have been a lot of, again, discussions on science. He gave speeches on the House floor, defending science funding, celebrating the NSF 75th anniversary. He spoke on scientific integrity and also defending the NSF GRFP, which was being cut at the time. So it was really exciting to be able to write these speeches for him and, given the circumstances, to try to make the case for science from that office. And just kind of for fun, as a result of the work, not really saying this to brag, but interestingly, we had 3 different outlets, eLife, Nature, and AAAS, all wanted to document, our views on science, the efforts that we were doing in the office. Obviously, there were a lot of eyes on American science at the time, but interesting to see that, this was interesting to them to document. So you can read these if you want to see more about what I was doing on the Hill. But this is also useful that you're realizing, Congress can help science. These are things that are going to be out there. People can read years later. But I will say that spending a year on Capitol Hill can really help your career, and you can sort of see, what Congress can do for science and for you as you're getting into policy. I think more broadly, it's interesting that these articles, have drawn attention to American science. And actually, some of these editors are not even in the US. So it's really got more attention than we expected, I think, from spending 1 year in Congress during an interesting time that there's been so much press on it. In addition to just a lot of documentation, but after spending 1 year, it's interesting to see all these things coming out of it. So it's a very effective way to try to influence science if you're on the Hill during this time. So the last sort of pieces here, so hopefully I gave you kind of a good overview of, what's been going on, where you can get involved. So we're going to spend a few minutes just talking about communicating with Congress, how to message things, which you've probably heard of in other places, but it's important to realize how many things are going on in Congress at any given time. So put the plug that if you can spend a year in Congress, I highly recommend it because it really gives you a broad view of what's happening. It's one of the things you have to kind of be there to learn, but from the outside, this is a slide. I think I used it before, but it's a list of the bills circulating in Congress at any given time point. This is a few years old, but if you just go through congress.gov and pull out all the different kind of most common keywords. It gives you an idea of how much activity is happening. Hill staffers are always busy, and building relationships with them to try to plug your issue and move your bill forward. You're fighting against a lot of things. However, if your member, as I mentioned, is on the right committee, has the right relationships, has influence on the Hill, your bill can move forward pretty far, and so you can have influence on what they're doing as far as legislation, bills and letters and speeches. So a lot of it is on relationships to try to get through this noise as well. So I gave you examples of the things you can get involved with, but it's important to think about how to message this. So in terms of the argument, it requires flipping the argument from the way you would normally talk to scientists, including sort of background, supporting details, and the results and conclusion. I think most of us are used to saying, I'm working on this issue. Here's what we did. Here's the research. Here's the results and what it means. But don't do that. Staffers want to know right immediately why they should care about this because they have to make the case for their boss. When they have a lot of meetings during the day, why is this important? Why should the boss support it? How is it going to help the constituents? How is it going to help this country move forward, et cetera? So the point is to tell them what you want them to know right off the bat, why they should care, and then add all the details. You're really flipping it around. I'll show you an example. It takes practice, but it's important to do this because staffers have very little time and a lot of priorities to think about, and the members too. So it needs to be relatable and really kind of quick, putting really what you need right off the bat. Someone asked a question and submitted before about how to communicate some of the nuances of research and how to do that. You can just explain it directly, but also relate it to what the members care about. So for example, and there's a lot of reasons why they might care about something. Could be a personal reason or something else. So it's good to do your background research on the member. Just one example is when I was at SFN, one member said he supported neuroscience funding because his mom had Alzheimer's. So that's a personal connection. He really wanted to help, and that was his reason. Another member may support science because it's something to do with their district, right? So they want to get reelected, but they're also there to serve their constituents and they want to do a good thing while they're there. So for example, Don Beyer has National Science Foundation in their district. So they're used to talking to scientists and that's one of their major constituents. So again, find those people that have an interest in science and so or maybe something personal reason to support it. And then committees again will matter in that sense. You can try to practice. That was another question that came in. How do I kind of learn to do this? There may be advocacy trainings at your institution with a lot of scientific societies. Now we're doing them too. You can start your own policy group, as I've showed you, trainees doing that, and also attending Capitol Hill days and Hill meetings with your institution or with your society or the chapter. Those are good ways to just get started and get a bit of a flavor of what it's like to do this. One way to do this is through the elevator pitch. which is really most effective because you can meet with your congressional staff. It needs to be very concise, explain the benefits of this work to society, be persuasive. You should have also different versions. So this is something that, sometimes congressional staffers have only 5 minutes. Normally they give you a 30-minute meeting, but things do come up. Congress is very fluid. Things are always changing. Their member needs something, they have to cut it short. So I advise people to create different versions of the pitch, like 30 seconds, 1 minute, 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute, just in case it gets cut short somehow. And then it's important to have a clear ask what you want the member to do, because again, the staffer needs to understand quickly what you want the member to be doing, why they should support it, why you're there, how they can help. So that's really important. Otherwise, it won't really work. And again, connecting to what the member is interested in, what they care about, and personal stories can help if you can connect to something they're working on and also don't have jargon. But you want to have clear call to action, again, what they should do. So this is one example. I'm happy to share the slides after, but it's talking about the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that wants to develop regulations to operate a nuclear power plant. It's saying, why should they do it? It's going to help address climate change. Again, very broad. The issue is that the research that they're working on can help develop some of these tools. And then, what'll happen when they act on it? It might be able to sort of help things in the next decade. So this is one of the examples. There are many others. I'm happy to send you more to kind of try to work on the pitch, but it's important to have an effective pitch. The other thing you can do is you can do a one-pager, which you usually leave with our office after you meet with them. That's appreciated by staffers to read after. Some of them prefer by email, but it's a good visual, sort of who you are, why you're there. Summarizes the issue and the recommendations for the member. They can quickly skim it. And then should explain also sort of, again, why the member should care and have a clear ask what you want them to be doing. And then sort of the angle of the argument, which can change. But you want to have different ways to look at this. You might be able to use this for saying you want them to sponsor a bill, sign a letter, give a speech, provide funding for a program or something else. So this is one I found online, which is sort of easy to look at. Supporting, lunches for kids. It's very easy. You can see very little words. This is not one that I wrote, but it's nice to see. It has data. It tells you sort of, this is why, the ask is vote yes on this amendment, and explains the data behind it, and then saying this is the only option, has their contact and so on. So quite clear as to what they want, and who to contact for more. The other thing you can do is you can write letters to Congress and emails to congressional staff. And they do respond, especially if you have relationships with them that you build over time, they'll respond. For example, when Trump took office the second time in our office, we heard from a lot of institutions in the district how faculty were impacted, how students were impacted in the district. So that's something that members and staff appreciate hearing from. And then a few pointers to think about when you're writing a letter to Congress is are you representing yourself or your institution? Again, what do you want them to do? If you want them to co-sponsor a bill or introduce a new one, make sure that hasn't been done before. So again, a lot of preparation before to make sure that what you're proposing hasn't been done already. Think about where the money should go. What is the context in terms of, is this member going to be able to push the bill forward or not? That depends on kind of limitations based on whether it's Republican or Democrat, and again, what committee they're on, what kind of level of power do they have to push something forward. And then who are they, impacting as far as stakeholders, how are their constituents being impacted, depending on the question. And so wanted to, I guess, show one example here that we worked on UC. So we send this letter on behalf of the UC system to House Science Committee leadership, endorsing NSF for the Future Act, which eventually became part of the CHIPS and Science Act, essentially supports NSF funding. And so you can sort of see what this looks like. Coming from an institution, you're writing it to the leadership of the committee. This is the case where you would send it to a committee staffer, and they can, push it forward. So it's important to have this in terms of institutions supporting what Congress is doing. And just the last little bit here, again, trying to answer some of the questions you all had. How do I even develop these skills? How do I sort of convince Congress? So I guess I want to highlight, that you already have a lot of these skills that you need. So Congress, a lot of times, again, will look at expertise to try to ask researchers if they're working on a specific bill, try to find the right person who's doing that research to help them. So they will look to you as somebody who understands, managing projects. I mean, there's a lot of things that staffers do also. They want to develop really good, evidence-based policy, understand sort of how the process works. They want to have data for it. But they also manage a lot of projects. So, and I guess as a scientist, you're sort of used to doing a lot of this already. So moving into a staffer position, you're already doing a lot of this and might be able to relate to a staffer what they're doing. And what I would suggest is, developing some skills to communicate to non-scientists. So this might include not writing papers. So don't bring your paper to Congress. Don't bring slides. As we talked about, they're quick. They need to understand quickly what you need. So that's really where the practice is as far as communicating to non-scientists, as far as, quickly giving the messages, understand really who you're talking to. A lot of it includes developing consensus and building these relationships and networking skills, again, with congressional staff, but it's really a lifelong career skill to develop these relationships that can help you move forward. And so finally, I want to end with, what really works with Congress. I know this is, I appreciated that I worked for somebody who's already very supportive of science, but this doesn't always work. So what resonates with a Democrat is different from a Republican. Who they represent also matters, right? So again, what's in their district will influence what they do. Impacts in constituents really matters, regardless of political party, because they want to help the voters. Those people voted them in for a reason, but again, they want to do something good, and not just for their constituents, but for this country. And so if there's folks that are less sympathetic, again, I know this came up in the questions. I think from my experience, what has worked are sort of large discussions around the workforce and the brain drain, right? That's why I started with that. We're losing our competitiveness in science. That's something that Congress generally tends to respond to, regardless of which side they're on. They want to keep the workforce here. They want the United States to be #1. So if we're not, that'll impact them. As a member, they also want their name on things. So if you can, talk to a staffer to get the member to lead on something, like a letter or a bill, they will appreciate that because they want their member to lead on those things and have their name on there. So, but generally, I will say, obviously, not everyone is sympathetic to research and research funding, but you don't need all members of Congress to sign onto a bill so that it passes. There's 435 House members, so you won't get them all in there. But it's more about sort of strategy as far as, again, who is interested in those topics, what committees are they on, what positions of power are they in, and how likely are they to move things, which is another lecture, I guess. But a bit of a flavor on that, to sort of give you things to think about, that there are things that resonate in Congress overall, again, for different reasons. So get to know the members and do your research. So I think that's all I had for today. Wanted to encourage you to connect on LinkedIn as well. Happy to stay around for some questions. And also on my website, there's more of the work we've done, and happy to chat further. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really great. We already have some questions in the chat, so I think I'm going to jump in there because we only have about 8 more minutes left. But kind of a nice transition. We got a question from Francia Tenorio. I hope that I said your name right. Feel free to unmute yourself and jump in if you want to explain your question more. But they ask, do you have any further insight into the extent of the brain drain in the US? Which places are American scientists gravitating towards, and how marketable are they?
Not other than really have seen a lot of articles out there on that. I think that it's very attractive to other countries. Um, I think I've seen more articles coming out. So I think that's one of those things you have to kind of wait and see how things are gonna look. Um, but it's happening. I mean, I guess I've seen it myself, but yeah, keep watching the news on that.
Great, thank you. We also have a question from Jason Miller from, I believe, Arizona State, who asks, how can we bridge the gap in STEM communication and meet people where they're at? So translating complex technical issues without causing that classic deer in the headlights reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we sort of covered that, and I think it's because we really been talking more about engaging with Congress. So, as a staffer, they'll really care about what their members interested in. So if you know what those things are, right, they're there to serve the member for whatever reason. They're likely to support something, right? As we talked about this, it's like their district is impacted. They just care about something. Sometimes it's really random. Members just want to support things that they're interested in, and they have the power to do whatever they want because that's their office. Um, so I think get to know the staffers who are working on those issues. Like a lot of science staffers, they're really nice. They're there to help and hear from you as a constituent. So it really depends on the issue, but I think, getting to know sort of the members' priorities and the staffer who is working on those issues and kind of build those relationships for when the time comes that you want to pitch something.
Thank you. I also have a question, not just speaking to members of Congress, but also speaking to just kind of the general public, if you ever hear of some kind of misinformation. So I was wondering if there's any kind of common scientific misunderstanding that you think is important for us to be aware of, so that when we are kind of advocating for ourselves and advocating for our science, we know how to answer the question if it comes up kind of suddenly.
Yeah, I think, the public, I guess one thing I've heard is people don't necessarily think science is for them or it's not impacting them. So kind of get going more out there in the community. I like doing, volunteering at science fairs, things like that. And even just making the point of, science is sort of everywhere, even if you don't see it. Like, if you think about your cell phone, for example, right? So there's some scientists that probably were involved in creating that at some point, and trying to find some of those real life examples that people are using, right? That there's science involved in things that you're doing, but even just going to like a science fair can work.
Great. So I maybe let me see in the chat again. So if there's any other questions, again, please just raise your hand or put it in the chat. But there's another question here that I think is kind of interesting. So what skills do you use in your advocacy that you gained during your scientific training?
Yeah, I think one thing is, I would say project management is a lot of things going on at a given time, right? You're just sort of doing that. The other thing is kind of you're adapting to this from the sense of when you're a scientist, you're more of a specialist, right? As a policymaker, you're a generalist kind of covering a lot of issues, but it kind of ends up being similar in the sense of trying to do a lot of projects and prioritize which ones are due first, that sort of thing. Can be, I would say, on a more faster timeline in some ways. Science tend to move slow, policy moves fast sometimes, especially in Congress, it's really fast, at least in the House. Um, so things that would require adapting would be kind of the fast pace and sort of broader issues you're working on. But at the sort of fundamental level, it's really about trying to manage all the projects you're working on.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I see that Lauren has posted this, but if you are we have like 2 minutes left here. If you are a UCI PhD or postdoc, please stay on the call, and we're going to talk about the next session. Or I'm going to pass it off to Lauren for the next session. But before everyone leaves, I just want to thank you for attending this session and for questions, either if you posted them early or if you asked them during the session. Yeah, I just really want to thank you, Dr. Nathan. That was really awesome. It was great to hear from you.